Hi everyone, and more sobering news. Listening from Telefonica Global Solutions, there are 350% increase in the overall attacks for cyber security. Well, that's obviously something that should make us all stand up, look at what's out there, and know your enemy. And that's probably exactly what we can do in the next 30 minutes. I have a pleasure of being here with Peter Morgan, the head of technical pre-sale at Cellusys. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Dario. Thank you
Hi,
very much
Peter.
for having us today. Yeah, great session there from Telefonica, and hopefully we can add some more information to the topic matter.
Well, before we can even start, the topic is phishing. Who are you talking to? How do I know it's really Peter talking to me?
That's a great question, Dario, and it's something that we really want to try to get across. It's how can you trust who your calls are coming from here? How can you trust who your texts are coming from? Now, I noticed in the chat beforehand you did ask for someone to volunteer a number, and unfortunately we haven't got anyone to do that. But before I start talking about phishing and the different attacks we see on email, voice, SMS, I'd like to start with a quick demo because I want to show people how easy it is to actually spoof a number. Because spoofing is an intro to phishing, and generally if you see a message coming from a source you trust, there's an inherent belief that you're talking to someone you know. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch my screens, and I'm going to start displaying my phone. And I have luckily muted all my notifications, so hopefully nothing major comes up here. So if you bear with me for one moment. So
I'm afraid I'm on the edge of my seat. I think be careful of what's happening next. Somebody told me.
Oh, I'm looking forward to displaying this now. I'm just getting everything set up. One moment, and I reconfigure. So yeah, the idea behind this demo is to show how easy it is to spoof, and we didn't get any victims or anyone volunteering a phone number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spoof a completely made-up number. So I'm just going to spoof a range of zeros calling my phone. So if I go to share my screen now, hopefully my phone is now appearing. I'm going to go and I'm going to initiate a call. And like I said, I've just spoofed a basic CLI here. So I've based a basic CLI. It's just going to be a series of ones. So I'm going to go ahead now. I'm just on my testing platform here, and I'm about to initiate the call. Again, the idea behind this is a very simple thing, a very rudimentary attack, or a very rudimentary setup. So I've initiated the call, and that should come through now quite shortly on my phone.
While the call is happening, I can tell you that I had the pleasure of being hacked by Peter a few days ago, and he told me he could use my phone as well for today. So I have been spared, it seems, by you. It worked.
I decided that, Dario, I would be nice and not disclose your number to all of our audience members here.
Well, you probably already have my numbers, but thanks for the thinking. But here it is, and only Friday you show me how easy it was to have my number appear when I'm not calling at all.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hoping now that this is going to come through. If it doesn't work on this attempt, what we can do is we can leave it to the end and come back. This is the danger with live demos. Here we are now. So I hope it's clear on my interface here that you can see +1111111 is calling me. And on the platform we use to test this, we can actually use and spoof any number. So if I wanted to spoof your number, Dario, that is something we could do. If I wanted to spoof a local government agency, again, that is something we can do. So I just wanted to show this as a quick demo on showing how easy it is for attackers to do this. So I'm going to switch back to my slide deck now and continue the presentation.
Tell us that there is some hope, because if identity doesn't exist anymore, what are we going to do about it, Peter?
And I hope by the end of this presentation, Dario, I'll have answered that question. So I've just I just completed my demo. It went better than when Elon Musk tried to demo his Cybertruck. So I hope I showed actually how easy it is to spoof for caller ID. Going on, and like I said, I was showing caller ID there as it's usually an intro vector to phishing. But why do we consider phishing such a big problem for the industry as a whole? SMS and calls are a great way of engaging our subscribers. Our subscribers are always connected. Sending an SMS message, you can send it to any country, anywhere in the world. And for SMS, especially A2P SMS, there's a large amount of...
Peter,
yes.
I think we cannot see your slides as you still need to share a different screen.
Oh,
so
I apologize.
If you just have a quick check so we can actually add to your commentary with slides and
sorry.
There.
Listening to me talk isn't as good as looking at the slides, I assure you. Give me one moment and I'll reshare that.
We're going to go back in full screen and I will disappear from the screen so you can actually see the slides and Peter himself.
Okay, perfect. All these video conferencing platforms, getting used to them all during the pandemic has been one of the joys I think we've all had to experience. So I hope now that the slideshow is appearing.
Well, I think it is. I can see Elon Musk.
Perfect.
Attempt. So you did
and his failed attempt. Hopefully mine went a bit better, or gladly mine went a bit better. So like I was saying, SMS is a great way of communicating with subscribers. For businesses, for governments, everyone is connected. Everyone is able to receive SMS messages. And what we want to get across here is that we want subscribers to be able to trust SMS messages. So you can see on the screen here, I've displayed two separate text messages. On the left here, this is a smishing attack. This actually came from a colleague of mine within Cellusys, and you can see it has his name, and we've actually changed the location of where he lives. And then on the right here, we have two legitimate messages. Both of these came from long numbers. Both of these came from long numbers. Subscribers are inherently going to trust numbers like this. So you can see here the MEF text messages, that's the UK government sending messages about car checks. In Ireland, where I'm from and where Cellusys is based, our government is actually using long numbers to do the vaccination rollout. So over the past year, I think everyone on this call, and I can't tell you the amount of times I've had friends sending me messages they've got or telling me about voice calls they've got about smishing and phishing attacks. These attacks are definitely on the rise. And I think in a couple of the presentations beforehand, it was mentioned that COVID has led to another attack vector for attackers to abuse to try and communicate with the subscribers we are looking to protect. So I think it was mentioned as well earlier on that we're constantly seeing headlines like this. We're constantly seeing headlines warning subscribers not to click messages, not to click links in messages. And as long as these headlines are coming out, we're eroding the trust that subscribers have already implicitly placed in SMS. As I go on, I'll go into more statistics on the click-through rates in SMS and how many people open SMS versus email. But we want to maintain that trust. We want subscribers to be able to get an SMS message and say, okay, this is from a legitimate source. So what is phishing? Phishing isn't a new phenomenon. I think the first email phishing attack was sent in 1995. We've just seen a rapid increase, I suppose, over the last year or two in SMS phishing, or smishing as it's called, and call and voice phishing, or vishing. And so I'm going to go through a few more examples of this as we go forward. What is spoofing? So at the beginning of the call, I showed an example of myself spoofing a very basic number, 11111. A lot of time, what fraudsters will tend to do, and what we've seen, is they will spoof local numbers. These might be local numbers associated with government agencies, associated with a bank, or even a family member. And the idea behind this is to lend legitimacy to the attack. So like I said, if a subscriber sees a call coming from a government office, they're more likely to trust what is being said on the far end of that. So that level of trust is there. And unfortunately, for smishing attacks to work, there has to be some level of trust between the victim and the attacker. So what is smishing? Smishing is when a subscriber receives an SMS message that includes a URL link. And the end goal of the attacker here is for the victim or the subscriber to click on this link where they will be redirected to a phishing website. And this website is going to look like a mirror image, and I'm sure we've all seen these, a mirror image of a legitimate enterprise, DHL, a government organization. They're very sophisticated clones of legitimate websites. And the idea here is attackers are trying to get subscribers to disclose sensitive information that they generally wouldn't. This might be personal identification numbers. This might be information to do with credit cards or banking. And once they have this information, they'll defraud the subscriber. So this might be through directly draining their bank account, or as I believe it was mentioned in the previous presentation, through ransomware attacks. SMS attacks over recent years have become a lot more advanced. We're seeing, as a vendor who's combating this, we're seeing more and more spear phishing attacks. So a spear phishing attack is when a small group or even an individual subscriber is targeted to try and get their information. And we've seen a case of this happening with people in the cryptocurrency space, as again was talked about earlier today, where these people are being targeted in order to gain access to their cryptocurrency wallets. We've seen the likes of hailstorm attacks. And these type of attacks are short bursts of traffic, and they're designed to get around typical SMS firewalling methods. And these methods are something I'll go through later on in the presentation. And something we're seeing a lot of as well is data dumps being used to acquire more information about the victims of phishing. So like I said earlier on, when a caller ID is spoofed or a sender ID in an SMS message is spoofed, it lends credibility to the attack. But what attackers will do in a lot of cases, they'll include personal information they already have on you. It's like I showed, they'll include your name, they'll include your address. Again, this is to make the subscriber believe they're talking to someone they already know with, someone they do business with on a regular basis. And like you can see here, there's been an increase in the last year of over 300% in these types of SMS attacks. These attackers, it's their full-time job, unfortunately. It's a 24/7 thing for them, and there's quite a significant amount of money to be made here. We can say these attacks can be quite situational in nature as well. So I'm showing an example here of an attack that happened shortly after Rogers, a Canadian network, had an outage. So they had an outage, and they notified their subscribers on Twitter that they would reimburse them for the period of the outage in their upcoming bill. But within 24 hours, there was a smishing campaign already pretending to be Rogers, trying to get their subscribers to click a specific link and disclose their information. So fraudsters they're on this. They're monitoring these type of events constantly and seeing how they can benefit from this. I have another slide here that discusses FluBot, and this has already come up multiple times today. But FluBot is, at its core, a smishing attack. So what happens with the FluBot is a subscriber will receive an SMS message with a click-through link as well. They'll be brought to a site, again, a mere copy of a real site, and they'll be talked through installing a specific app. And when they install this app, it's quite sophisticated in nature. What it will do is it will allow the attackers to track that subscriber's location. It will monitor form inputs. So if they're inputting credit card information or personal information, this will all be sent back to the control server for the FluBot attack. And not only this, when the FluBot application is installed, it will send the context of the newly infected device back to the control server. And subsequently, these contacts will then be sent the same or slightly different smishing messages to try and infect their handsets as well. So it's trying to reproduce the virus here on more and more handsets and spread itself efficiently. So we've talked about smishing and SMS. What about phishing? So phishing is, again, something we've seen, especially in Ireland anyway, and the UK, a large rise in over the last year. And phishing is voice phishing. It involves fraudsters using sophisticated speeches to try and believe or convince subscribers that they need to perform an action very quickly. They're generally emotional plays. So one of the things we've seen here is calls coming from government organizations. So for example, a tax office saying you've missed a tax bill, and that if you don't pay it immediately, you will be subject to specific fines. And then they will say, okay, send us your credit card information on the phone right now and we'll take care of it, and there'll be no extra charges. Again, it's trying to get an emotive reaction from subscribers here and bypass their critical thinking. Again, we've seen these attacks become more advanced as time has progresses. So I've already discussed spoofing, but when we talk about multimodal attacks, this is when attackers will communicate with their victims in more than one way. So an example we've seen of this is an Amazon attack, or an Amazon spoofing attack, where initially the subscriber was contacted via email saying that, okay, you have made this Amazon purchase, generally for a very high value item. If you did not make this purchase, please contact us on this phone number. So the subscriber will then ring the phone number, and it's a sophisticated setup. It will sound like an Amazon call center. They will say, okay, if you didn't make the purchase, please confirm your name, confirm your address, and please confirm your credit card, and we'll ensure this is reverted straight away. So this is an example of a multimodal attack that we have seen, and that is currently ongoing. So I've talked about SMS and voice phishing and what they actually are. The reason we believe in protecting them is, like I said, SMS is a great means of engagement for businesses, for governments with their subscribers. At the moment, when it comes to SMS traffic, we can see from this slide, the open rate for SMS messages is 5% higher than emails. Or sorry, 5 times higher than emails. Subscribers still trust SMS messages. What we want to try to prevent happening here is for SMS to go the way of email, where every time you get an email, there's, oh, is this potentially fraud? And we want SMS to continue to be a good means of engagement. So what are the challenges associating with protecting SMS, especially when it comes to smishing attacks? So I believe Stuart Mitchell was talking about this earlier on in the chat group. There's nearly 1 million URLs registered on a daily basis. These URLs, they're cheap, they're easy to buy, they're easy to set up. A new phishing site is registered every 20 seconds. So relying on blacklists simply isn't an effective way to combat against this. So if we take the screenshot I have here of Hermes delivery, say we had the first URL being used, that was used in an attack, and after 24 hours, that gets added to a blacklist. As soon as an attacker has realized this, they will simply move on to using the next URL, or they will simply move on to changing the service that they're using. So Hermes here is a delivery service in the UK. They might switch over to using DHL next. So it's a cat and mouse game if we're using blacklists to combat URL smishing like this. The other challenge we have, I've already mentioned low volume attacks or spear phishing attacks. So generally spam filters will work in a couple of different ways. These will work on, and anyone in the A2P monetization world has seen this as well, looking for large amounts of repeated content within messages itself. But these won't be triggered if we're looking at small scale spear phishing attacks. There won't be a large amount of repeated content. The other way typical spam filters are going to work, besides blacklists and repeated content analysis, is volumetric analysis. And volumetric analysis will typically be used in regions where looking at content isn't allowed because of regulation. So when we look at ratio analysis, we'd be looking at the likes of, is it one sender to 100,000 receivers or one sender to 1,000 receivers in a specific period of time? Again, we're not going to catch this with small scale spear phishing attacks. I've already mentioned that we're used to seeing messages coming from long codes. So I'll talk, as I go forward, I'll talk on SMS verification or SMS sender ID verification programs. But again, subscribers are used to long codes being used to send legitimate messages as well. And again, SIM boxes and apps aren't directly covered under verified sender schemes either. When we look at voice, it's inherently difficult to detect spoofing when it comes to voice. And this is a problem that's been going on for years. And there is a couple of solutions to this and a couple of initiatives that are making steps in the right directions. And I'll talk about these quite shortly. But fraudsters are aware of how we are trying to combat these voice attacks as well. So a typical way of looking at voice profiling is looking at the length of calls. So if we see calls always terminating very quickly, so this is generally people hanging up really quickly, or if we see calls that are always the same length because they're using voice functions to talk to subscribers. And fraudsters have adapted their techniques to this. So they'll make their calls different durations. They'll call from a range of different numbers. As I also mentioned as well, they have convincing social engineering tactics. They've refined their scripts over time and time again of using these and talking to different subscribers and seeing the pushback that they get. And so I've discussed what is smishing, what is phishing, and the challenges to combating these. Before I go on to looking at some of the solutions, I just want to talk about the impacts again. So when we talk about the impacts on subscribers and businesses, subscribers, obviously there's a risk here of financial loss, of identity theft. When we talk about brands, there's brands damage associated with this as well. So the likes of DHL being impersonated, Hermes being impersonated, and government organizations, this brand damage is not something these people want to be associated with. When we talk about the impact on operators, there's brand damage to the operator for not protecting their subscribers. There's also the increased cost of having to deal with complaints from subscribers to call centers, and the possible subscriber churn because subscribers aren't happy with the amount of smishing messages that are currently being received by them. And we talked about FluBot earlier on as well. It's a lot easier it's easier to try prevent FluBot infecting handsets than it is to try and clean it up after it's already happened. I think a lot of networks are currently experiencing the pains that come with identifying infected handsets and contacting these subscribers. And then when we talk about the impact on the SMS channel as a whole, so I've mentioned that SMS is a great way to communicate with subscribers. SMS is also quite lucrative for MNOs at the same time when we talk about A2P revenue, both for one-time passwords and just general user engagement from businesses. Again, this is just more examples of the cost to subscribers, the cost to enterprises. I'd like to talk about the Nirvana situation. What if subscribers could trust their calls and messages? There's reason to believe operators can increase their revenues by increasing their market share if they're protecting their subscribers from these, as well as saving money, like I previously mentioned, from not having to deal with the ramifications of subscribers falling for these type of attacks. And there are some really good solutions and initiatives being worked on. One of the ones I mentioned earlier on is the MEF, Sender ID verification scheme. And this has been fantastic in the UK, where sender ID spoofing for SMS has largely been eradicated because the majority of, or all MNOs there have signed up to this initiative. And this basically means that sender IDs must be registered and can only come across the approved routes. The problem here, unfortunately, is, like I mentioned earlier, long codes are still trusted by subscribers, so they can still bypass these sender ID schemes. Now, Google is working on something similar. I've already talked about some of the shortcomings when it talks to spam filters and SMS firewalls. They're generally good at stopping bulk campaigns, but even when it comes to stopping bulk campaigns, when it comes to looking at repeated content analysis or machine learning or AI, they generally have to build a model. They have to identify what is happening. And this generally means some messages will pass through before they've identified these bulk campaigns. Another option here is URL verification. So this is checking URLs that are contained within SMS messages against external threat intelligence databases. If these databases say these messages or these URLs are safe, are trusted, we allow these messages through to the subscriber. Otherwise, we're able to warn the subscriber. We're able to alter the SMS message so the subscriber knows this is potentially an unsafe link. When it comes to phishing, we have the likes of STIR/SHAKEN. STIR/SHAKEN has actually been mandated in the US and a number of other countries. And STIR/SHAKEN is again used to validate the calling party or the caller ID of calls. and it basically allows the receiving network or the receiving interconnect provider to validate that the calling number has come from the appropriate network. We have different validity checks that we can apply on calling parties as well. So like I mentioned earlier on, when spoofing calling parties, largely fraudsters will spoof local organizations that we're used to dealing with, or local numbers. So one of the things we can do here is we can check that if it's a long number and it's coming from our international links, we can do a location check to ensure the subscriber is actually roaming. And again, we can check if we're seeing these numbers coming from our international or national links, that these numbers are actually assigned to real users and aren't just completely spoofed. In the case where we're looking at non-spoofed caller IDs or SIM boxes, we can look at blocking based on call duration, like I mentioned earlier on, or call patterns. Are we seeing abnormally high volumes of calls coming from a specific calling ID, going to a large range of destinations? So in conclusion, this is worth solving. Subscriber experience over SMS and voice is something that I believe as an industry we need to protect. I believe there's benefits there for MNOs in terms of increasing market share and also securing trust in the A2P space, which again is a lucrative business for us. There are better ways. Some of these I've gone through here: verified sender schemes, caller validation, URL verification. And I do believe a collaborative approach is needed here. I think that we need to work together as an industry to tackle this problem. Vendors, aggregators, groups and operators, and industry bodies such as the MEF and the GSMA. That's everything. I've sped up there quite a bit towards the end, and just because I'm quite conscious of time. So yeah, please, if there are any other questions, please let me know.
Well, Peter, you did very well of time. We were running 5 minutes late, and you seem to have caught up and providing us a very sobering yet successful use case on how you can actually pretend to be anybody in the world of telecommunications out there. So any phone number can be spoofed. I like your mention to industry bodies, including MEF, so thank you very much. And as we're running out, we probably will not be able to ask you questions. But Peter, if you and the Cellusys team are around, I believe there is a booth as well, you'll be able to get additional questions in there. So congratulations on scaring us as well, but giving us a bit of a glimmer of a hope, Peter. It's not all so bad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dario, and thank you for having us. And yeah, like you said, Cellusys is around for the rest of the day, and if anyone wants to talk to us in the comments or contact us privately, feel free to do so.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dario.